Now we're in a position to ask a third question. Why did Moses write Genesis chapters 1 through 11? What did he intend to convey to his Israelite readers? On a very basic level, we can be sure that Moses wanted to teach Israel the truth about the past. He wanted them to know what their God had done in the early years of world history. Just as the myths of other nations were intended to convince people of the perspectives of those myths, Moses sought to convince Israel of the historical truths of their faith. But upon closer examination, we're going to see an additional purpose behind Moses' primeval history. Specifically, he also wrote in order to influence Israel to conform themselves to God's will. Now, this additional purpose is not readily apparent to everyone who reads Genesis chapter 1 through 11, but it becomes clearer once we realize that other primeval accounts shared this purpose as well. Now, before we can understand the purpose of the primeval accounts of the ancient world, we have to realize that many ancient Near Eastern cultures believed that the universe was structured or patterned according to a supernatural cosmic wisdom. In its ideal state, the universe operated according to this wisdom or divine order, and it was the responsibility of every person in society, from the emperor to the slave, to conform as much as possible to this divine order. Now, what does this have to do with primeval myths and epics in the ancient Near East? The cultures around Israel had primeval accounts which spoke about the events near the beginning of time. They did this in order to explain the structures which the gods had erected in the world in ancient times. Their traditions regarding the primeval times were not merely concerned with early world history. They wrote their primeval accounts to justify their current religious and social programs. The writers of these texts, who were often priests, pointed to the ways the gods had originally arranged the world in order to show how things were supposed to be in their own day. At times, they focused specifically on religious matters such as temples and priests and rituals, which temple was favored by the gods, and which priestly family was to serve. At other times, they were concerned with broader social structures such as political power and laws. Who was to be king? Why were some people slaves? Their myths called the people to conform to the creation ordinances of the gods, the structures they had set for the universe. As we will see in these lessons, Moses wrote Genesis chapters 1 through 11 for very similar reasons. On the one hand, Moses wrote his primeval history with an explicit focus on the ways Yahweh had created and ordered the world in ancient times. From creation to the Tower of Babel, Moses told Israel about the ways things happened long ago. Yet, he did not do this simply out of historical interest. As Moses led the Israelites from Egypt to the Promised Land, he faced many opponents who believed that he had actually misled the children of Israel. And in response to this opposition, the primeval history demonstrated that Moses' policies and goals for Israel were true to God's design for the universe. As a result, to resist Moses' program was to resist the ordinances of God. In his record of the ideal creation, in Genesis chapter 1 verse 1 through chapter 2 verse 3, Moses showed that Israel was actually moving toward God's ideal by going toward Canaan. In his record of the world's corruption in chapter 2 verse 4 through chapter 6 verse 8, Moses showed that Egypt was a place of corruption and hardship which resulted from God's curse on sin. Finally, in his record of the flood and the resulting new order in Genesis chapter 6 verse 9 through chapter 11 verse 9, Moses showed Israel that he was bringing them into a new order with many blessings, just as Noah before him had brought new order and blessings to the world. These primeval facts fully justified Moses' vision for Israel's future. If he could convince Israel of these truths, then the faithful among Israel would turn from Egypt and take the land of Canaan as their divine inheritance.